It's day one of 37 in what will be a short but rapid fire and intense election campaign that at this point could be anyone's. Here to help us understand the party's strategies, we have two strategists. We have Anne McClellan, who of course many of our viewers will remember as a former Liberal minister of public safety, and Cole Haan, pardon, not Cole Haan, like the designer, Cole Hogan, but just as cool, who is a conservative strategist. We're out here today. It is the day before, and the last opportunity to do this before Parliament came back. What's going on inside the Liberal machine right now?
Right now, they're gearing up to get the tour started. I mean, the Prime Minister will be heading out to St. John's, Newfoundland earlier today. They will want to make sure that they've nailed down the details of the tour. They know Prime Minister Carney new to campaigning really of any kind, so they'll want to make sure that they've got the details down, that he has the support he needs. They'll want to make sure that candidates across the country, we still have ridings where we don't have candidates, so obviously behind the scenes working hard to make sure we've got candidates in all those ridings, but basically gearing up, getting ready for what is a sprint of 37 days.
Cole, what does week one look like for the Conservatives?
Sure. I think we've seen Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives already on the road. The other weekend, Pierre was in Sudbury. Conservatives are sort of scattered across the country, hitting the hustings, and putting their best foot forward. I think we saw it last week as well. Pierre put out a series of policy announcements throughout the week. I think as it continues, you'll see day after day, policy announcement after policy announcements hitting the door and having huge rallies.
One of the big questions that's overshadowing this whole campaign is how to deal with Donald Trump. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives had an initial plan. That plan has obviously been blown to smithereens to some degree, although I'm sure some of the portions stand. How do you expect, starting with you, Cole, this time, because I think it's the bigger challenge for Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader to present himself as the best person to deal with Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think we're seeing language get a bit more firm. We've seen Pierre say, stop the chaos, stop the tariffs. We're seeing a bit more stronger language from Poilievre towards Trump and on the tariff war. And I think we've seen overall as well, Pierre has sort of, the policies now that we're looking at are like, let's keep interprovincial trade moving, let's move goods east-west and sort of north-south, and saying, in order to put Canada first, here's the policies we need to enact in order to do so. When I look at the polls in particular in terms of who Canadians best trust to deal with Donald Trump, the Liberals and Mark Carney do have an edge right there, but I think not dissimilar from the Ontario election where we saw tariffs pivot back to the economy, where Conservatives are naturally more stronger right now, we might see a similar dynamic play out here during this election.
Yeah, and Mark Carney's a very different candidate for Justin Trudeau in that he does have much more strength on the economy than Trudeau did, but he's also going to have to carry some of that Liberal baggage. This is still a Liberal government asking for a fourth term, albeit appearing to move towards the centre. How is Mark Carney going to deal with that same question of why he's the best person to deal with Donald Trump?
First of all, remember, this is Mr. Carney's first election, right? Yes. So he is new to the scene and to this set of issues. And I think all you have to do is look at what he's done so far. What you see is Mark Carney drawing upon the experience he has had, dealing with major crises, both as the Governor of the Bank of Canada and the Governor of the Bank of England. He understands the economy. He understands how and what you have to do to make an economy work, to make it grow, to create high-paying jobs, and I think also if you look at the approach he's taken to President Trump, it's not panic, right? And that comes from inside him and his experience. It's calmness, it's thoughtfulness, it's not empty slogans. It's, you know what? I'll get around to talking to President Trump, but I'm not going to go out of my way. I am going to wait until I believe he, the president, can treat me and my country and the people who live in my country with respect. That speaks to calmness, thoughtfulness, and having the experience to know how to deal with these situations.
Cool. One of the tough questions for Pierre Poilievre has been that he gets painted with the MAGA brush, even though he backs away from it. And Donald Trump came out and said this whole thing where he'd prefer Mark Carney to Mr. Poilievre. I was at an event with Mr. Poilievre yesterday. He was, trying to underline that. Are you concerned about that? And how do you set him apart from MAGA Republicans in this campaign?
Yeah, I think I look at President Trump's comments in terms of, I'd rather deal with a liberal. I think it'd be better for us to get a deal with a liberal in office. And he pointed towards, Mark Carney as the person that he wanted to deal with, that being the liberal leader. When I see the impact that would have, Pierre Poilievre in response was like, well, of course, and they were highlighting Trump's comments to say, of course he wants that. They're looking at the liberal record in Canada, which has resulted in a weaker economy, a higher cost of living. So we've seen the Conservatives point to that as evidence as why Trump would want a liberal prime minister instead of a conservative prime minister. Now, I don't contest to know or be inside the brain of Donald Trump. I think that'd be an uncomfortable place for all of us to be.
If anyone could do that, they'd be very gainfully employed.
But I think you'll see a more patriotic, Canada first line of attack from Pierre Poilievre to separate ourselves from that sort of, assumption.
And one of the clear strategies of Mark Carney and his team has been to undercut the Conservatives on some of their own policies. I mean, they're flat out stealing some of them, which, I guess it shows that you're willing to move ideologically, but it also shows a lot of fluidity. Where do you expect the party to come down here? I mean, this is obviously not the further left Justin Trudeau, Katie Telford, Jerry Butt's party that a lot of business liberals were criticizing as being too much like the NDP. You want to eat the Conservatives' lunch, but you also don't want to lose the progressive vote. How do you balance that?
Our natural home, I think, is as centrists, where the vast majority of Canadians live their lives. Not too far right, not too far left. And I think you see that reflected in the approach that Prime Minister Carney has taken so far. Look, things evolve. So as it relates to the consumer carbon tax, look, we lost that battle with the people of Canada. There's no point in fighting a battle you've lost, Mercedes.
The Conservatives think there's still a battle to be fought, though, over the industrial tax.
But that's on the industrial. And in fact, what's interesting there is most Canadians actually do believe that industry should pay for the pollution they create. So that will be an interesting debate during the election campaign. But I think the party and Mr. Carney is talking about the kinds of things that matter right now to Canadians. Number one, how are you going to deal with Donald Trump and the threat he provides to the Canadian economy, to jobs in this country, to our sovereignty, to our security? And what you're going to see Mr. Carney talk about, as he did Friday with the premiers, right, is around how we collaborate, how we work together to make sure that we are secure, that we're building the economy, we've got the growth we need, we deal with interprovincial trade barriers. Look, Donald Trump is an existential threat, but let's not let this crisis go to waste, right? Let's do some things we've been talking about for 40 years and get them done.
I want to ask each of you, what is the biggest risk to your campaign and what's the biggest advantage, starting with you, Cole?
Sure. I think the risk here, too, is just the volatility of Trump and tariffs during the election. I think if it comes down to how do we best protect Canada's economy under the threat of Trump and these tariffs, we'll have to see the Conservatives duke it out with the Liberals there. And it's interesting, too, because the NDP appears to be a non-element in this conversation. I think, where there might be a potential weakness on the Liberal side of things, or a strength for us, is if we see that NDP vote boost back up. If there's a split left, there's a lot more ridings that are in play for us than the other parties.
Anne, biggest risk and biggest advantage?
Well, I think biggest advantage is Mark Carney and the fact that he's Prime Minister and he's experienced and he understands a time of crisis such as the one we're in. So I think he is the biggest advantage, unless you want to put Donald Trump in that mix too, because we do need to be honest that after January 6th, the equation changed for many Canadians in terms of what they were looking for in terms of government and a leader. Disadvantage might also be Donald Trump, right? In the middle of a campaign, throwing a grenade into the situation, which would throw leaders and campaigns off guard for a period of time, would in fact take Mr. Carney off the campaign trail, because as Prime Minister and the requirement to in fact govern, in fact you don't know.
Yeah, but I think it'll be really interesting to find out how all this plays out, what Donald Trump does, which none of us know, and also where these campaigns are really going to focus in, and how two really untested leaders play out. That's all the time we have for this panel. But thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks.
We'll be back right after this break.